Andrew, thanks very much and welcome from us. So what do we make of what happened in the capital? Well, it reinforced the notion that London is still fundamentally Labour-leaning, at the moment anyway, with the Conservatives losing several, though not all, of the marginal seats that looked dodgy for them. But here too, the unforeseen and surprising story was virtual wipeout for the Liberal Democrats, losing 6 of its 7 seats, including very senior figures. Andrew Crine reports.
It was the night London bucked the trend. Labour lost seats nationally, but picked up 7 gains across the capital.
I'm going to represent the people of Brentford and Isleworth.
And for the next few months at least, the Labour leader is going to be a Londoner, Camberwell and Peckham MP Harriet Harman. But the party's good fortunes in the capital did have their limits. Targets like Hendon, Finchley and Golders Green, and here in Battersea, all stayed Conservative.
Now, Battersea is exactly the type of seat that the Labour Party had hoped to win. As it happens, it's not just a Conservative hold, but an increased majority.
Battersea has seen the benefit of that recovery. Unemployment's down by 40% since 2010. Youth unemployment is more than halved. We have more than 500 new businesses here creating jobs and opportunities for people, and particularly young people.
And across London as a whole, the Tories lost 1 seat, but did see victory in Uxbridge for one of the capital's most recognisable political figures.
And I hereby declare that the said Boris Johnson is duly elected.
But it was a bad night for other household names, particularly Lib Dem ones. In Bermondsey and Old Southwark, Simon Hughes said an emotional goodbye to supporters after decades as the local MP.
Now, people talked a lot about the difference that an incumbency would make for the Liberal Democrats in this election. The idea that once they win a seat, they're very hard to get rid of. Now, Simon Hughes has been the MP here in Bermondsey for over 30 years, but Labour still took the seat.
He became contentious by supporting the bedroom tax, which hit 5,000 people in the borough, by supporting the legal aid changes, which left families without support, and it left legal professionals out of work in some cases. He supported the NHS change, which left people waiting for operations. So he became contentious. Students, aren't massively in favour of Liberal Democrats over tuition fees. We've got a big student population here.
In all, it was a disastrous night for Lib Dems in the capital. Cabinet Ministers Vince Cable and Ed Davey also lost their seats, and the party were left with 1 solitary Member of Parliament. And all in all, it left London's political map looking like this. Almost no yellow, about the same amount of blue, and a splash more red. A very different picture to the Conservative win nationally.
If I were looking for a single plausible reason why Labour did well in this election, it would be, I think I'd look at housing more than anything else. The thing that differentiates London from the rest of the country most in terms of many public policies, and is different now to 2010, is that the perception that the housing crisis has got worse is much greater now. And we know there are more people renting every year. Renting as a proportion of the total is going up. Owner occupation is becoming ever more difficult.
We're just calling just to thank you for all your help. It obviously meant a lot, and it was very close result.
Labour activists in Ealing Central and Acton this weekend. The seat was won from the Conservatives by just 274 votes and has the distinction of being the constituency with the 3rd highest number of people living in rented accommodation in all of the UK. Labour then put part of their victory here to the increased difficulty voters feel getting on the housing ladder here in London, but also the impact of accident and emergency closures in this part of town.
The NHS was the #1 thing on the doorstep. There's already been 2 A&E closures, so Hammersmith Hospital lost its A&E in September, and Central Middlesex, which is the nearest one to here, lost its A&E. It was a brand new facility. People were worried, and I think should justifiably still be worried about Ealing and about Charing Cross. Hi, thanks for your support, thank you.
But while Labour activists in many parts of London may be celebrating this weekend, there's no getting away from one simple fact. This is a general election that their party lost.
Indeed. Joining me, 3 who won their seats on Friday. Conservative MP for Chipping Barnet, Theresa Villiers, who is, unless we hear otherwise, still the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. Yeah, yep. Who knows? That could change while we're on air. No, we're unlikely to change, is it? That's Andy Slaughter, Labour MP for Hammersmith. That is very unlikely to change in the next half an hour. And the last Lib Dem standing in London, Tom Brake, who won in Carshalton and Wallington. Welcome to you all. pretty difficult not to start. And we don't often do that, do we? Start with the Liberal Democrats when we're in these kind of election discussions. But hard not to after what happened. I know you've only had a couple of days to reflect on it, and you've said already that you think it's going to take some time to try and dig deep and find out what happened. Yeah. But what are your thoughts?
Well, clearly tuition fees was an issue, remained an issue throughout the 5 years of the Parliament. But I think the biggest problem that we had was failing to share in the economic recovery. I think we tried to get our message across, but in circumstances where for every one Liberal Democrat minister who is speaking about the successes, there were 5 Conservatives, with the national press overwhelmingly echoing what the Conservatives were saying in government. We didn't benefit from what has been a substantial economic recovery in which key ministers like Ed Davey and Vince Cable played a very significant part.
Now, you say that now, but you didn't pick
that
up.
We said it during the campaign.
Were you picking that up? Were you picking that up?
We knew that was what we had to achieve. We had to be part of the success of the economy, and we didn't manage to grasp
and
that.
you were picking that up on the doorstep?
Yes, we knew that is something that we had to do.
Right. And so how come you survived and the others didn't?
Well, I think I was just lucky. I was slightly further ahead. I think we had a very strong base and we worked very hard in the constituency for the 25 years that I've been there. I've been holding a street stall in Wallington High Street once a month for the last 25 years. So people know who I am. They know I'm around. They know I'm active. But I think we were just slightly further ahead. And I think the other thing that was significant was that the Conservatives, who have quite a lot of money to deploy in election campaigns, chose not to deploy it against me when they did deploy it against people like Paul Burstow, Vince Cable and Ed Davey.
Theresa, so they shared in the pain or making the decisions, but they got none of the gain electorally. And address the other thing, which some of the candidates were saying, was just because you'd created a climate of fear about the SNP.
Well, I think people responded very positively to our message about the importance of dealing with our debts and continuing our work on our economic plan to fix the economy and creating jobs. We campaigned both on our track record and what we were going to do to keep people's taxes as low as possible. Yes, it was right to point out, the chaos that I think would have come with an Ed Miliband government propped up by the SNP. But the heart of our campaign was a positive message about repairing the economy and delivering prosperity and jobs.
Didn't they do that positive message as well, then?
It is. I think obviously there'll be a lot of reflection about why the 2 coalition partners got such dramatically different treatment at the ballot box. But I think a lot of that was down to David Cameron. I found throughout the campaign he was a huge asset on the doorstep. People wanted him to continue as Prime Minister. They believed that he'd done a good job and they wanted him to carry on. So that's why that was a positive that we had, which our Liberal Democrat former coalition partners just didn't.
Andy, hold back from talking about Labour's position in London, but give us your observations on Liberal Democrat wipeout or whatever, why it happened. No one really saw it coming, did they?
Well, I think they've been dishonest. I don't mean individuals, but as a party they've been dishonest and they've been found out. In the 2005-10 Parliament, they positioned themselves to the left of the Labour Party. Within 24 hours, they were not only bolstering the Tory government, but they were also the Tory narrative about what had gone wrong. And then suddenly in this election, they want to be a sort of centre-left party again. And people have just said, sorry, we don't trust you anymore. And they got, frankly, what they deserved. You didn't mention distrust at all in your explanation. What do you say?
Well, I think people tend to distrust all politicians. I don't think it's particularly the Liberal Democrats. But I think what Andy forgets, and Andy likes to have a go at the Liberal Democrats, I know that, is that before the 2010 general election, the country was in a huge economic mess. That what happened in 2008, yes, it was partly global, but it was also homegrown in terms of the lack of proper regulation of the banks, which Ed Balls was responsible for, which left us in a much worse situation than many other European countries. Tommy, and if Andy was honest, he would accept that.
You've been taken for fools, haven't you? You're still spouting the Tory line, even after they wiped you out, cannibalised you. I mean, you're going to have to grow up as a party. It's going to take you a generation.
Are you disputing the fact that in 2008 the country was in an economic mess? That we had the largest deficit in the industrialised world? Do you dispute that?
We can have because that's a fact. Discussion. A world recession, a Tory party that supported
a lack of banking regulation, which left our banks very vulnerable.
And you're just still in denial. You're still
a Tory party that
was one of your
further than
during
us
the campaign
in deregulation. Never hear anything about that now.
Yeah, but you were in charge. Theresa? Your government was in charge.
Are you sure you're not still in a coalition?
I mean, the reality is that Labour continued to borrow throughout the excessive boom years, which put which meant we were in an extremely weak position when the crisis hit. And that contributed in a huge way to the deficit crisis, which subsequently
why did,
erupted.
just before you come in, why, Theresa, did Labour make progress in London and London continue to buck the trend? What is the problem? What's the toxicity? Maybe that's putting it too strongly, but in London, toxicity still around the Tories.
Well, certainly we clearly didn't do as well in London as we did elsewhere. And it's heartbreaking to have lost brilliant colleagues like Lee Scott and Mary MacLeod. I think in a number of places, a number of former Lib Dem voters seem to have ended up with Labour in a way they didn't perhaps elsewhere. But we will obviously be campaigning hard to deliver for London as the new majority Conservative government. London is the powerhouse of our economy, and we are going to continue to back business to ensure that we deliver on not only new jobs but new apprenticeships, and ensure also, of course, that London schools are some of the best.
It was a scare campaign, a Jacobite scare, fear of the Scots, bizarre policies, which I'm glad to say that people in London didn't swallow. Very negative about individuals like Ed Miliband, trying to frighten people into doing that, and it completely went wrong in London. In London, you lost seats to us, but seats, as you say, like Ilford North, Enfield North, which you held by big majorities. You lost.
And yet you look at other signals, and you look at Hendon, the very closest target, up in your Theresa's neck of the woods. You look at others you'd have expected. If you were doing anything meaningful, you'd have Finchley and Golders Green or Battersea, when the swing was going in the opposite direction, back to the Conservatives.
Well, one thing we probably...
that is a problem. That surely goes to what people have been saying all day, that you didn't sound like a party for the aspirational.
I'm not sure, Tim, that you can put a bad spin on this for Labour. It was a good night for Labour in London. I appreciate it was a terrible night elsewhere. But the one thing I think we'll all agree on is...
Not against expectations.
Is that we all lost very valued colleagues. Andrew Dismore not being re-elected, Sarah Sackman in Finchley, Will Martindale in Battersea would have been superb MPs. I'm really glad you saw Rupert Huck at the end of that we've got some really good MPs. And the reason we've got those MPs is that they fought on the issues you heard Rupert talk about housing and about the NHS.
Tony Travers talks about housing as well, Theresa, and there must be some concern, isn't there? Or will you concede there's concern about that being an acute issue in London, and the voters appear to have decided that you guys just don't have the answers?
Well, I mean, we still had some excellent results in London. You pointed out Hendon, where a majority of 104 was transformed into a majority of nearly 4,000. I mean, Labour clearly thought that they had it in the bag, and the people of Hendon told them that they didn't.
And there's plenty of new housing going on up there as well, presumably.
Huge,
you might make
massive amounts of...
Tony Travers, saying, not a political point, but Tony Travers saying, if you're looking for an explanation why Londoners still don't believe or don't get the Tory, thing, and in spite of having a Conservative mayor who was pretty active during the campaign, housing clearly looks like a real problem from your point of view.
I think it is obviously a key priority for the new Conservative government to be delivering more housing. We believe that it's possible to do that. There are many brownfield sites in London which we can use to try and mitigate the problems people have with getting affordable housing in this city. It was at the heart of our campaign throughout. We are determined to deliver new housing for London.
But I think the problem in London, of course, is that Londoners had the mayor's record to look at. And what he has delivered is 11,000 properties per year, when London actually required 25,000. So actually the mayor has failed. And my worry is that now the focus, which from a London perspective should be on housing, that he should have, his attentions now are elsewhere in terms of coming back to Parliament and any future ambitions he may have. And I think for London, that is bad news, because London is a great city and it requires his full attention.
And Andy Slaughter, if there was such a take-up, if there was such an acceptance of the message you say on the health service, if there was such strong feeling about, housing, you would have polled properly, seriously ahead, largest party kind of ahead nationally. You would have got the seats I mentioned to you before.
I think those issues hit home more. They will begin to hit home, I'm sure, within another 5 years of Tory government in the rest of the country. They're already hitting home in London. The average price of a house in my constituency is approaching £1 million. It's not just, as Tom says, that they're building very few houses. They are only luxury houses.
But in the end, you threw all that stuff at people in London. You won a few seats in London, but it was not like anyone looked at this government or looked at Labour and said it was going to be in any position to form a government and deal with those things.
Really, Tim, please. We won 7 seats. Simon Hughes, an MP for 30 years. Lee Scott, who I think was a good MP. I think he's a nice guy, big majority, but he lost. He lost because he supported those negative policies that don't give any hope to London.
OK, put it this way then.
But it doesn't matter whether you're trying to rent a home or buy a home or you're a council tenant.
All right.
There's nothing the Conservative Party offers you.
Help us from this, though. So if we were to concede or accepted that London, you know, certainly did in terms of its net gains, you call that a success. Why does Labour, your party, not reach anywhere else around this area, the south of England, south east? Well,
that's a wider discussion, and that is a problem for us. I think of all the problems that we had on election night, that's the one that we need to do the most scrutiny.
So it isn't any good, is it? If you're just a kind of metropolitan, you know, moaning metropolitan city.
We're not. Look, if we're winning seats like Enfield and Ilford, they are not. They're outer London seats. What it proves...
Why no appeal in the south of England?
If you do the work, if you connect with people on the issues, as candidates like Wes Streeting, who's now an MP, Joan Ryan, who's back as an MP...
But help us, why no appeal on the south or south of England? It's just a little island here, isn't it, London? Why no appeal wider?
Well, we have got seats outside London. Of course, we have got many seats across the rest of England, and we need to build on that. That we do have to do a bit of soul searching in terms of why we didn't pick up some of those marginal seats in the Midlands and the north.
A bit of there'll need to be, no doubt, a little bit more analysis before we can say for sure, but assumption will be that you're still failing to reach out to black and ethnic minority populations and a population which, of course, is increasing steadily, and no progress there at all.
Well, I was going to say, I think where, you know, Conservatives need to do better in London is in relation to black and minority ethnic communities. We still haven't caught up with those communities. We haven't caught up with Labour in those communities, so we do need to do more. Our values...
Why not? No, hang on, Andy. No.
Our values are very much in tune with the values of BME communities, entrepreneurship, support for aspiration.
So what is it? The great communicator David Cameron and the great communicator Boris Johnson just can't communicate that?
I think we need to work harder at it. I think we need to engage more closely on it. I think it needs to be a higher profile part of what we do, but we have made considerable progress. And, you know, we're getting more candidates from minority ethnic backgrounds elected. It is hugely important if we are to do better in London next time round.
Look, we'll pick this up again in a moment, but just want to deal with this. We talked a lot about the main parties. What about the smaller parties? Well, UKIP failed to win their top target, Thurrock, on the outskirts of the capital, but they came second in 5 London constituencies.
Come second in 5 constituencies ought to have alarm bells ringing, both for Labour and the Conservatives. Because they can come second in Labour constituencies and in Conservative constituencies. And that does tell us that there's a proportion of the population that simply doesn't think that Labour or the Conservative offer them anything at all.
And UKIP were still a factor. They came second in 5 seats out in East London. But still a factor, I think, made a difference to people like Nick Dubois in Enfield. What are you going to do to counter that? Because it's only going to grow potentially, isn't it?
Well, we are giving the UK its referendum on the European Union, and we're also determined to, you know, fundamentally reshape our relationship with the European Union. That in itself is a huge issue for UKIP voters, but also that negotiation is pivotal to getting, you know, common sense outcomes on immigration as well. So we will continue to respond and take action on the sort of issues that are of concern to UKIP voters.
And Tom Bray, I don't want to rub it in, but you're among these parties now.
Well, I think, for instance, Theresa's just mentioned the European Union. I think that presents an opportunity for us, because I think what is going to happen over the next couple of years is that the government is going to be unduly focused on a referendum about the EU. During that time, a lot of businesses are going to be scared to invest in the UK. I think that is very bad news for London in particular, because of the finance sector being so strong. So that's something where we will want to campaign. I'm very pleased that since polls closed, there are 5,000 people who've joined the Liberal Democrats. We've had 5,000 members who've joined in the last 48 hours. I think they want to be part of this rebuilding process. London is a liberal with a small L, tolerant internationalist city, and I think there is a very central role for Liberal Democrats to play in that, and we are starting the fight back now.
UKIP second in all those seats in...
well, not many. I don't want to be complacent about UKIP, because I think they're a nasty, dangerous party, but I think that most of London saw through them, and certainly the reaction that I had is more common on the doorstep for people to be worried about how UKIP were doing than to say they were supporting you.
And the Greens didn't, where we suspected, make much of a difference in places like Ealing. that seemed to fade, didn't it?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day that some says Liberal with a small L, but also a Labour vote, because they see Labour as a progressive party in London on exactly those issues. It comes back to issues again and again, exactly what we were talking about in terms of hospitals, hospital closures.
Okay.
We've talked about housing,
Couple
issues.
A couple of things with the time we've got left. I mean, the next big election in the capital is this kind of mayoral thing. Do you kind of look at this, and you look at the results over the last couple of years, and locals last year as well, and you kind of think this is almost a done deal, you know, Labour can sleepwalk to victory in the mayoralty?
Absolutely not. No, I mean, people said when the office of mayor was created that, you know, there would never be a Conservative mayor, and we've seen a hugely successful Conservative mayor in office for the last few years. We'll be working incredibly hard to re-elect a Conservative mayor.
And what about your own future? Have you got any hints at all about what's happening to you?
Well, I won't know for a little while as yet. We'll just have to wait and see.
Would you like to stay where you are in Northern Ireland?
I'd be delighted to. It's a fascinating job. I think it's gone well. I'd be happy to do that, or I'd be happy to do any other role that I was offered.
And do you reckon you're going to hear today, or...?
I get the impression it may be tomorrow, but who knows?
And Tom Brake, how do we come back from this?
Well, as I said, we've had 5,000 people who've joined the party in the last 48 hours. They want to be part of that process. We will have a leadership contest, which will finish in mid-July.
Yeah.
So we'll have a new party leader. I hope we will have a number of candidates.
Is Tim Farron, do you rule out standing yourself?
I'm not standing myself, no.
Which one do you like, Norman Lamb or Tim Farron?
I like them both, and I think they'll both be fantastic leaders for the party. But I think what will happen during that contest is there will be an opportunity to talk about what went wrong, what sort of strategy do we put in place. But as I said, London is the sort of city where you need a Liberal voice. For instance, the government are about to reintroduce the Snoopers Charter, which I think has major civil liberties implications, and I think that is something that appeals to
too much policy detail on a Sunday afternoon. We'll have time enough to talk about that. What kind of candidate? Does this change the kind of mayoral candidate that you look for now? Because a majority Conservative government, does it change the kind of style? Do you want someone more adversarial? Does someone need to be...
I disagree that Boris has been a good mayor. I think he's been a self-serving individual who's put himself before London.
My question was about a Labour candidate.
Well, that's the point I'm making. We need somebody, and I'll be perfect honest, I hope Sadiq Khan stands, not just because he's my boss, but because I think he represents what's good about London. That somebody who's interested in those issues and has the backstory that says someone like me, immigrant background, born in the UK.
Why would he be better than Tessa Jowell, for instance?
Well, that's a discussion that we will have today. But what we all have...
Do you have to have a discussion about that? Or if you're backing one person, what will you say about Tessa Jowell?
We'll have an election to decide it.
But what do you think? Yeah.
But Tessa's a great candidate. We've got other great candidates. The interesting thing is that the Labour field is already very strong. Who's the Tory candidate? They haven't got one.
Yeah, who's the Tory candidate?
Well, there are many potential candidates out there. I'm not going to speculate on which one. Well, Stephen Greenhouse, for a start, who I think would be excellent.
OK, and before we even go down that road, to all three of you, thank you very much indeed for giving up your Sundays. Thanks very much. Andrew, back to you.